I don't think we can be sure of anything at this point. I think there is the possibility, the prospect, that diplomacy may de-escalate the situation and we may be able to move towards what has always been our goal, which is let the Ukrainians make their own decisions about their own lives.
That's President Obama just moments ago saying it's too soon to be sure whether a diplomatic agreement will be enough to de-escalate tensions in Ukraine. Welcome to your Thursday afternoon news hub. I'm Sarah Murray. The president's comments on Ukraine coming the same day officials from U.S., Russia, and the European Union all agreed to a framework designed to defuse the political and security crisis in Ukraine. Joining us from Washington with more details is the Wall Street Journal's Washington bureau chief, Jerry Seib. Hi, Jerry. Thanks for being here.
Hi. Thanks, Sarah.
So the president does not sound totally convinced that everyone is going to abide by this framework they just agreed to. What's your take on what he had to say just now?
Well, I think he's voicing reasonable skepticism, given that I think a lot of what the Russians have said and what President Vladimir Putin said as recently as today on this subject seem to be essentially half-truths, or at least somewhat misleading. This is an agreement that's supposed to make everybody back down in eastern Ukraine, make the militia groups that have taken over some government buildings from the Ukrainian central government get out of those buildings. The Ukrainian forces will back off. Everybody's supposed to calm down, and there's supposed to be some international observers who will somehow make sure all that happens. I think the flaw in that, and the reason the president is probably skeptical, is that nobody really claims control of these Russian-speaking militia groups that have created the problem that they were talking about today in the first place. And so since they claim they're not under Russian control, how are they going to necessarily abide by an agreement that the Russian government says it accepts? I think there's reason for skepticism, and I think the president was essentially saying, words haven't mattered very much in this crisis, so we'll have to see.
And Jerry, the president pointed out that essentially we're going to have to wait a few days and see what happens. What are some of the signs that we should be looking for over the next few days to see whether this agreement really is going to hold any water?
Well, look, I think one of the first things to point to, Sarah, is the fact that because there's something that's an agreement, even if you're skeptical about how rigorous it is or whether it'll hold together or not, it probably has the effect of delaying the imposition of more meaningful sanctions on Russia from the outside, economic sanctions from the U.S. and its European allies. So in that sense, I suppose Vladimir Putin has won something today. He has agreed to make groups that he says he doesn't control back away from a situation, and in return, he's likely to get a sort of a pass for a while on more economic sanctions. And so that's the first and most immediate effect, I suppose, from the Russian side. I think that the real question and the real test over the next week, I would say, is the extent to which the Ukrainian central government can actually move in and take back control of what it thinks are institutions that it ought to be controlling. And then I think third and the longer term question is, can the Ukrainian government, under these conditions, conduct a fair and safe election late in May to pick a new president and start over again? That's still, in my mind at least, very much in doubt.
Jerry, the president ostensibly came out to talk about health care today. This was a deadline to sign up for the exchanges. He said 8 million people have signed up. About 35% of those are young people, which is a critical demographic. They passed by that pretty quickly in the news conference today. How much have these diplomatic crises just completely overshadowed the president's agenda going into this year?
Well, we have a piece that looks at that to some extent on the front page of the Journal today, and I think this was a good example. There are good news numbers for Obamacare. 8 million enrolled, as you said, 35% of those under age 35. This is a better showing than anybody would have guessed even a month ago, I would say. Yet the first question was not about health care. The first question in the press conference that followed was about Ukraine. So, the reverse would also be true. If Obamacare were continuing to have problems, this would be a distraction from that as well. So I suppose it's all as fair. But I think the reality is that healthcare has turned into at least a neutral and maybe tending toward at least a net positive to some extent for some Democrats. It's not getting a lot of attention right now.
All right, Jerry Seib, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks for joining us.
Sure.